So we'll save the best to last. And next we have Alice Santman. Alice provides BIM implementation strategies from design and construction to FM owner solutions. She's a developer of custom application integrations as well as new connected platform workflows through the Intemation team. Having started in architectural field, designing and building custom residential projects in the resort communities of Colorado, her focus quickly shifted to data and facility management in the water, wastewater industries to healthcare manufacturing across the state. And so without further ado, Alice, thank you very much.
All right. Let's see, keys. That's me. All right, here we go. So thank you, Claire, and thank you all for staying this late and listening to the last of the day. I'm excited to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the owner's side of what I have now focused my work on, and a little bit about Intemation to start. Sorry, going too quick. Yeah, there we go. Intemation, when I came on, was in medical equipment planning, and all they did was select, procure, and commission medical equipment on hospitals. So in doing that, when I came on, the conversation started to come to how can we expand on that? And with my experience, I've got a little over 30 years in the industry of AEC, and now I like to call it AECO, so that with the owner obviously is last, and I am last of the day. So 30 years, architecture, and now a focus in design technologies. So what we often get on the owner side looks something like this. A bunch of data. It's not organized. We've heard about standards. We've heard about a lot of things here today. And what we're going to try and do is figure out how to make that pile look a little more organized for the owner-specific side. And what the owner really wants is access to their files, their documentation, their PDFs, and even their models. It could be in an IFC format. It could be in a Revit format. The bottom line is we need an access to all of this data. Regardless of format, we need access to the data. So what we're trying to do very first, and you've heard a lot from the previous speakers, is speak to standards. But here I'm talking about owner standards, very specific owner standards. The point of this is we often will see in the beginning of a project a BIM execution plan come out through whether it's a Word document or you're using a great platform like Plannerly, who has a booth here today. Recommend talking to Clive. But what we want to do is talk to the owner about what do they need, how do they want to work, and how do they want to get their data back? Do they have a specific asset tagging system? Do they have a certain way that they work through their data and through their processes based on teams? We want to understand that and help them to write those up. On the owner platforms, we want to talk about what are they already using? Do they already have Power BI? Already using a scanning system? We want to understand what they have, so we might be able to integrate with that. And very often in the States, everything seems to be collaborated on a BIM 360 or an ACC platform that's being used today. So from this, what we get is we'll end up with an understanding better of their teams, because we've talked about standards and we've talked about their platforms. So we'll start to understand, well, what do their teams use? Are they got an accounting team? Most obviously do. Planning and construction. In healthcare, we often have a team that works on next renovations of a hospital. So they have a very specific department. And then operations and maintenance. And they all need access to all of the data. So by needing access to that, we start to understand their workflow. They may all have the same data, but they access it for different reasons. So we want to understand that. So what that allows us to do is make some early gains. We don't want to get the data at the end of a project. We want to get the data in progression, in milestones during design as well as construction. So as we get that, we can start to build some simple Power BI reports, which will break us down by systems. If we're talking about a piping system, it might break us down by a room, square footage area report, or maybe some life cycle data. And we can filter it through Power BI. Everyone's probably seen many Power BI reports, but we can do that in many different ways and get early gains. It also lets the owner start to get familiar with their platforms, right? They need to understand how to use them, what are the picks and clicks, how do they filter? Very simple, but it really helps them quite a bit. So what we do with this early gains is we start to build it into a basic BIM 360 dashboard. On the Insights tab in BIM 360, You can add in Power BI reports that have been published. You can add in Matterport scans, and they're going to interact the same exact way as they do in your Power BI. So here we just have a simple square footage report at a senior care center. It allows them to filter by a department, or in this case, a wing of a building. Is it mechanical needs, administrative needs? And it will always summarize their square footages. Also in one of our facilities, the GC was using Matterport, all scanning before it was closed in. So we have scans that show all the spaces with no sheetrock, no ceiling tiles, and then we go back and we scan it finished. In our application, as I'll show you later on, we're then able to have them toggle off and on before and after scans. This is a great way to tag elements, connect to that data, and also they have an open API, which lets us develop even further on this process. But of course, the back end, a lot of the people, when you hear the word back end, we think source code. We think the developers who are sitting there writing all that code that, to me, can often look like gibberish. But really, another back end is Revit. It is your beginning database on every project. We may not like it, but at least in the States, that's our main platform. And what I see a lot of when I start to gather these models, I can see 5 different ways to name level 1. For example, here, level 1 is level 0. But somebody might say the word 0, and somebody might use the number 0, or somebody might say ground floor, or somebody may say street level. That seems really silly, but it really matters when it comes to your database. Level is a level is a level. It should be the name across every single discipline model. Similarly for phasing and work sets. Keep them organized, keep them clean, and make sure everyone's using them the same way. They may not like it at first, but it will simplify their life. Tagging is really important. The owners and their operators like to see things a specific way. A hospital may be different than a semiconductor that's different than a manufacturer. So tagging is key to understand and get that normalized early on. Also, one of the things when I end up getting models that are going into that master owner environment, which all of this is about, is there's a lot of tools that I use that are add-ins and some are free. Highly recommend DI Roots. I'm sure you've heard of them. They've got a great ribbon. Just this week, they've issued their public beta on the IFC viewer, which also imports and exports data. Highly recommend checking them out. PyRevit, of course, if you know any Python, really simple language to start to learn. But you can add your own tools and have some awesome tools for rendering and creating sheets. Tracer is an add-in to Revit. It costs a little bit, but it lets you export a database of your choosing for Power BI. Of course, Dynamo, everyone knows Dynamo, won't go into that. Layer's one I've just started playing with, and this is all about room data sheets. You can do this on your own in Revit, but it's tedious. This is an application which is really flexible, and you can link directly to your model and start to build room data sheets that can progress and live over time. It's a great tool, I highly recommend looking into it. So what we're really talking about, which I don't know if they mention it here, but in the States it's used a lot, that single pane of glass approach. What we want to do is take Power BI or Matterport or all these tools that we're using, we want to get to them all from one place. We want to be able to log in and let them find their way based on their needs, their workflow, and that can relate to anything from accounting for cost analysis, can be even building sensor systems. But let's get it so they don't have to have 5 different things open. Open one, get to what they need, and let them do their job more efficiently. That's really our goal. So what we did at Intemation was we took that medical equipment planning tool and we started to expand it and started to explore how can we make that more of a life cycle approach. So we break it down by assets, spaces, and containers. Containers can also be systems. But by breaking it down in these 3 basic categories, we can now start to understand how do things need to find each other. That may sound a little weird, but you need to know what an asset is as well as where it is. And is it behind a wall? Is it above a ceiling? We need to know that. Does it belong to a container of various disparate things? So we want to understand all of that. So really what we started with when listening to our owners was, what do they want to see? This may look really boring and simple, but our owners said, get us to the assets first and show us how to get to other things from there. So we took our asset list and we started to make it very filterable by a number of a space, a name of a space, or a department, or a level. And we can even just put in a straightaway room name at the top little search, and it will just jump them right to that space or that asset. On the right, what we did is we broke it into various levels of information. So the details is really just that first piece. It's giving us the tag name, the system ID, or whatever it may be. But from there, what we've done is we want to get a little deeper into when they asked us, once they saw their list, they said, can I see where that asset is in the model? Well, of course, Autodesk Forge API allows us to go and grab that model, modify the API, added a button that says, there's your element that you've selected. It'll jump them to it. They can walk around the model. If they get lost, we have a button that'll find their way back to that element. Then what we started to do is say, well, what parameters do we want to start them off with? And then we train them to show how do you create your own parameters that are specific to their role, and then how do they enter that data? So we start an asset with just manufacturer and model, very basic. But of course, they can add, a color to an element or what that may be, and we show them how to update and add those elements. Then we have a library that is connected to our system, and there's two ways we do this. This is really based on, is it an on-premise solution or is it a cloud-based solution? Some of our clients do not want cloud. They need to be on-premise behind their own firewall. So we've created a library that can be local to that database, and we can connect their O&Ms, warranties, or other items. If it's cloud-based, we can connect that directly to their BIM 360 hub, and they can attach the same documentation to that same asset. So it's very similar in our Spaces tab, except here, instead of assets, we're listing our spaces, again, searchable by name number, and then the initial view will show them their Matterport finished view, and if there's any tags appropriate to that view. So from there, what we've done is a big request was, can we see the pre-sheetrock view alongside the other? So we added the button, and they can jump back and forth between before and after, basically. And it allows them to still walk around that space. It's not just a stagnant thing. They can move through the whole building in that view. From there, we also wanted BIM to be able to see parameters against that space. What are the wall finishes? What are the colors? What is the floor and what's the area? Is there an occupancy rating in the space? That's data that we want in there, but we also want them to be able to add their parameters and their data as needed against the space. Also, when in the space, you can see immediately assets in that room. So if it's a mechanical room, or in this case, a commercial kitchen, that probably has 30 pieces of equipment in it. And we can pick one with the little blue arrow and jump right over to the asset information for that piece of data. Then what we've also done is the same library. We can attach floor plans, we can attach color swatch, those room data sheets can all be attached to that room space as well. So then we get to the system container interface. It's a little bit different, and it is going through some growing right now. But what we're trying to do, since one of our clients is very much into utilities underground coming into a building and really running literally chemicals and gases and water flows through pipe systems. So we needed to understand that. A system is going to have elements that are not alike, right? A pipe is different from a pipe fitting, which is different from a pipe accessory, which is different from a piece of equipment that might be pushing water. But all of them may be in the same system. So we take all of those assets and we can organize them into a system. We can put in the design data against it. We can also put in single line information and then still jump into specific asset data from this point. So this is becoming a really valuable tool for us, and we're having more owners on the manufacturing side asking about this feature. And like I said, we started in medical equipment planning, and we've maintained that, but instead of it stopping at commissioning, we're now managing those assets over time for our owners. And that the smart systems, everyone right now seems to be talking about the IoT, the live data. Not every owner wants their live data in an application. Some of it want it locked down. So how we get there is really important. We need to see, is it a hard wire or hard sensor that's on a piece of equipment in their network, or is it Wi-Fi based? These are things you must ask your owner about so that we're not putting too much information in the wrong hands, not only inside their firewall, but the security has to be different externally. We do have this being developed, and it's pretty fun to kind of jump in there and see where that's going. So what we're really talking about is the age of big data we're in. I'm sure you've heard it all today, right? A typical client of ours may have about these number of sheets or models or scan spaces in one system. And we try to centralize this data, give them one access point, and let them do their jobs more efficiently and cleanly, and it saves them time and money. So this process, for us, is showing to be a win for our owners. So with that, thank you to the BIM Coordinator Summit, letting me speak and go on about my little world. Thank you.